Hey, what's up guys, Tim with Go Cards. It's been a while. So over the last year and a half, as some of you guys may know, I've actually been playing Pokemon instead of Yu-Gi-Oh! And recently I've got into Pokemon Pocket over the last few weeks or so. It's really fun actually. I was skeptical at first, but I've been really enjoying it, so I really recommend you guys trying it out if you haven't already. There's going to be Pokemon Pocket videos and stuff on the channel for the foreseeable future. Yeah, small channel update. I just thought I'd get that over and done with, and then we can get into the actual content, which is I played the Ursiiday's Pocket Weekly event on Limitless this weekend. It was 1900-ish players, which is massive for a game that's literally got like 2 sets right now. So a lot of hype around this game. It's really enjoyable, so I get the hype. The meta is actually shaping up really well, despite like it being so early on, which I think is really interesting. Starting to see a lot of diversification now, and the third set is coming actually at the end of January, so I think it will really come into its own and expand from there. Yeah, just do a little tournament report and then a little bit of discussion about what I played, because I think there is some nuance that's not been explored necessarily very well with the game. So yeah, let's just get into it. So I actually finished, I think 14th, 14th, 9-2-1 in Swiss, or 8-1-1 in Swiss, and then won my top 32 match, lost my top 16 match. I played the Primeape Aerodactyl deck. I'll quickly just go over some metagame stuff because it is quite interesting. So there was like not, as you can see, the spread of decks is actually very diverse right now. With like, if you guys have been following Pokemon Pocket, Gyarados obviously is the new coming deck, and so Celebi's not been getting the play, a massive amount of play, but it's been in the background. Gyarados is the big one, Mewtwo's still around, and then the Pikachu variants, Golem, actually dropped off pretty badly this week in this event because there's a lot of countering for it. So I played the Primeape deck, which actually had a decent meta share. It was a good deck. I think it was a really good call for this event. It's got a really good matchup to Gyarados, even though that was, as you'll see when I show you the matchups, both of my losses were to Gyarados, which is quite funny. But the deck's got good spreads overall into a lot of the matchups. I think it's got a lot of diversification right now in terms of what it can do. The fighting Pokemon that are currently available are actually really strong. And also, if you guys have played the game a decent amount, you'll know that it's fairly luck reliant at times. Like, a lot of the decks revolve around coin flips, like 50-50 sort of effects. Like Celebi is like flip coins, Misty is flip coins, that sort of thing. And because there's no search, there's very little search. There's Pokeball for basics, and that's it. So there's very little search and very little draw. So that was part of the reason why I wanted to play something like the Aerodactyl Primeape deck, because it's not relying on multiple stages of evolution to play the game. It's relying on, a lot of time, just one, sometimes none, depending on the matchup. And I think that sort of really lends itself to a good consistent deck, especially in like a game where at the minute where there's such like a massive amount of RNG based mechanics, sort of variance. And I think reducing your variance is good for success in tournaments in general. So that's part of the reason why I played the deck. I do think the other decks are good. I just felt like this was the best pick for the event based on the meta and how little variance is actually involved in the deck at all, which we can explain a little bit more as we get into it. But quickly do matchups. So as you can see here, decently widespread of matchups. I lost round 1 to Gyarados, then beat Pidgeot Aerodactyl next round, a Pikachu deck the following round, Pidgeot. Paired 2 Gun deck, which I think is a very good matchup as well, which I thought would be popular going into the event, and I think there was, I'm just going to double check, I think it was the 5th most represented deck, which is quite a lot. Yeah, I think you have a really good matchup into this deck as well. Played a Mirror, beat 2 more Gyaradoses, then tied the last round. Beat the Aerodactyl Farfetch deck in top 32, and then lost to Gyarados in top 16, which is just a bit unfortunate with the variants and stuff like that, but obviously that's just how card games go in general. So that was more bad luck than it was like pocket variance, I guess you'd call it. Yeah, I thought like the tournament went well. Obviously started 0-1 to 8-1-1 to make top, which was cool. 1900 players, like I said, so a lot of X2s missed. But I think it's really interesting how like massive the scale of the tournament size is already. Like huge scale. Like even like the sort of not so large tournaments are hitting like 150, 200 players, which I think is just crazy. And the meta, like I said, is very diverse, and we're very early on, so it's going to be interesting to see how the game progresses. Anyway, so what I played. I'm just going to address the elephant in the room in terms of the deck. This is the wrong Mankey, for sure. It should be the one that just does 30 and does 10 damage to itself. I didn't play the game when the, what's it called, the promo for that Mankey was out, so I don't actually have it. So I had to play this objectively worse Mankey, I think. It did come up a little bit, just not hitting for a solid 30. Like, it does have, obviously, like, the higher sort of variance, like, roll, where if it's, it's 50-50 to get 50 damage. I would personally just rather it be more consistent. It did come up in a few games. I think it was the reason I lost round 1 to the Gyarados deck, because I missed the turn 1 knock on Magikarp by landing Tails, because, obviously. But I think that, like, it is fine to play this Mankey. I just think the other one is just better. And I think it's marginal, but I do think it does come up. So that's just a small thing about the Mankey. I played this Primeape because I think it is the best Primeape currently. The other Primeape, which does 100 when it's damaged, is good. I think the issue is that requires 2 energy, whereas this Primeape just requires 1 for 50, which is absolutely solid. Like, the idea of this deck is that it's all low energy cost. So you'll notice that a lot of the decks in the format are playing off at least like 2 energy a lot of the time. Like Mewtwo's attacking for 2, Celebi's attacking for 2, and then everything else is realistically a higher number. Some decks like Gyarados and stuff need 4, right? So like the aggression that Primeape offers early for 1 energy at 50 is really, really high. 50 is actually a really solid number. A lot of the Pokemon in the game are 100 health or less. Which means that Primeape is actually doing substantial amounts of damage onto those guys, which is pretty huge. So I think it is the optimal Primeape currently, especially because of the low energy cost, because that means you can set up your Marshadow or Aerodactyl for later in the game. Aerodactyl obviously being very solid as an attacker, Marshadow being, I think, the reason why this deck is good. So yeah, Marshadow, really, really good card, makes a lot of matchups solidly favoured. One-shots a Pikachu, one-shots like basically everything that isn't an EX for the most part. Really, really solid card. Revenge 40 plus 60 if one of your Pokemon's not last turn, so you can get very aggressive with the Primeape or the Mankey, Hitmonlee, and then return KO with Marshadow, and it being a single prizer is really important. And I played 2, so you can chain Marshadows, which I think matters a lot. Because that means you're consistently hitting like a really high damage output versus decks like Gyarados, which I think you'd struggle a little bit against otherwise. A really solid card. I think is the reason why fighting is probably the best aggro sort of like color at the minute. Sort of combined with Primeape and Hitmonlee, I think are just hitting such good variation in such good numbers so consistently. It's a basic as well. This is what I was saying about Primeape being stage 1. It's easy to set up, but the Mankey itself is also fine as an attacker if you don't draw the Primeape. Obviously this one a little bit less so because it is a 50-50 to land the attack, but it is good as an aggressive option. So then there's Hitmonlee, which I actually think like going forward as a world where you play 2 is really, really solid. It doesn't read like it does a lot, because obviously it just does 30 to a bench Pokemon. 1 energy, low energy output, like we were saying. But the format, as it's shaped up, is really heavily reliant on setting up decks. So, like Golem, Gyarados, that sort of thing. So, Hitmonlee obviously one-shots a Magikarp, which is huge. It brings the Golem down significantly in health by the time they set it up. So, that means you can return KO with Marshadow, for example. Same, hits Mew for 30, hits Celebi for 30, and it brings it into Marshadow range. The idea of Hitmonlee is really just to bring things into Marshadow range and apply like a really good early game pressure on a basic, which is obviously very solid. Because, as it stands with the current card pool, there is no way to, outside of Sabrina, to really get at the bench. So Hitmonlee is one of the sort of really, really solid options for fighting right now, and I think it is probably, again, same with Marshadow, the reason why fighting is probably the best like aggro range colour, type. So then Aerodactyl EX. This is the EX of the deck. I think it's the most solid fighting EX for a few reasons, and I'll go into that. So it's good stat ranges across the board. 140 and 80 damage is like 140 health and 80 damage is solid. Low energy investment again, 2 energy. Weakness to lightning is not ideal, but it's fine. The main thing is like because it's made off Old Amber, right? So Old Amber is actually really, really interesting because it's a Pokemon that you can't start with, right? It's because it's an item, it's in your hand, you play it out, and then you sort of go from there. I think because of that, it's actually really, really solid because it means that unlike, let's say, like a Marowak, for example, right, where you have to play a Cubone, and the Cubone currently is not very good, Old Amber, you don't have to start with. Like, you're not forced to start with a less optimal, like, starter Pokemon, whereas, you can start with Mankey or Hitmonlee, Marshadow, better starter Pokemon than just like Cubone, right? So I think that's why the big reason why Aerodactyl is so optimal. You can do cute little things as well, like bait them into like Inteleon or Hitmonlee hit an Old Amber, then discard it away, so they basically wasted a turn of that, which is ideal. It's also, it can't retreat, but you can discard it from the active to switch out as well, so it is a pivot option as well, which is somewhat difficult to have sometimes. So that's ideal. And then Aerodactyl also has the Primeval Law ability, which I think is reasonably solid, which is your opponent can't play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their active Pokemon, specifically active, which doesn't sound like it's particularly great because they can evolve on the bench, but some game states you do end up sort of trapping things in the active if you're aggressive enough, and that is the idea of the deck. So, it can be that, like, they don't want their magic up on the bench, for example, if you start with Hitmonlee, so they have to put it in the active to evolve it, which is, brings it then into sort of the sketchiness that is Mankey or Primeape attacking it, and that sort of thing. So I think Aerodactyl's ability is not necessarily going to come up every game, but it definitely comes up enough to warrant it being like a nice passive effect on the card. So yeah, I think that's really solid. And like I said, the game is very simplistic, so there's not a massive amount to talk about in terms of the in-depth aspects of the mechanics and stuff, but I think this list is very optimal. These Pokemon are very optimal. Like I said, I think the only thing is maybe second Hitmonlee, but I wouldn't want to cut the second Marshadow for it. I'm not 100% sure on that. I think the Hitmonlee is very solid, though. And then for the items / trainers, we've got 2 Pokeball, very standard, 2x speed. So this isn't... There's not really a massive amount to talk about with the trainers. I just wanted to talk about a little bit. Retreat costs in this deck, because you're ideally wanting to like attack very quickly, so if you have to start with Marshadow, X-Speed is actually very good for not having to retreat the Marshadow, attach to retreat and having to lose the energy on it, so X-Speed is nice for that. Like I said, there's limited trainer options at the minute, so it is sort of you're making the best of what you've got. Old Amber, I think, again, I think this card is actually just very good. I think Aerodactyl is very good because of the reason of it not... If it being a basic, that's not an actual Pokemon, which I think is really solid. Then Professor's Research, just draw 2. Giovanni, I think, is actually really good at 2 in the deck, because it lets you hit a decent amount of damage ranges. 110 off a Marshadow is quite relevant, especially if people are playing blue. In the Pikachu decks, which some are, I think, so it does give you that additional 10, which is pretty massive. Primeape and Giovanni for 60 as well is an important number to knock out Froakies and stuff like that, which I think is really important. And then 90 as well matters versus Golem. If they potion a Golem once, I think the 90 comes up. I can't remember the math off the top of my head, but it definitely comes up. And then 1 Sabrina. I think Sabrina is fantastic. I should have played 2, I think. I'm not sure what I cut. That's the difficulty. Again, deck space being 20 is very limited. But it's currently like the boss's orders type card in the format. Switch your opponent's active to the bench. They choose the new active, but this card is very good at closing out the game, especially when you're applying so much damage with the Hitmonlee and stuff like that. Yeah, I think this deck is really, really good. Yeah, I'll definitely make more Pokemon Pocket content. I'm really enjoying the game. If there's anything you guys want me to talk about or, sort of test out or anything like that, just let me know. Happy to do it. I'm really enjoying the game right now. Yeah, huge shout out to obviously Ursiiday and Limitless for running massive events. Obviously, it's putting all this stuff on for free as well. All these events are free. which is just huge. But yeah, cheers, guys. See you next time.